Hello and welcome to Game Bet Match, the tennis podcast brought to you in association with Bet Rivers, your hometown sportsbook. Usually we come on once a week and talk about the ATP Tour, but no, we're into 2023, which means we've got 5 days of new shows per week on tennis. And now every single Monday we have a new show on Game Bet Match, and we'll be talking about the WTA Tour. And I'm delighted to say that our WTA expert for 2023 is Mr. Rory Jiwani. Rory, Happy New Year to you and welcome along to the Bet Rivers Network.
Happy New Year to you too, Nigel. And great to be involved. Looking forward to it. It's been a long time since we've worked together, but looking forward to getting stuck into the WTA. I've seen the ATP stuff you've done with Sean Calvert, and it's impressive. I feel like I've got a bit to live up to there because Sean is very, very good, but we'll do our best and hopefully point our viewers, listeners in the direction of some winners now and again.
Well, listen, that's a lovely compliment. Sean will be, he's now the senior handicapper of the ATP Tour, which I'm not very happy about senior, which we'll mention, we'll come on to a little
senior
later
means
on.
Old, doesn't it?
Exactly. Well, so... in my book, it means old, but in Sean's book, it means something else. But no, it's delighted as long as we have you on. We'll have 5 shows a week now. So every Sunday, myself and Sean will break down the ATP Tour. And on Monday, the WTA Tour, which myself and Rory will be. And we also look on Wednesday into a player perspective with former tennis world number 4 and American number 1, James Blake. So really, really exciting times ahead in 2023 on the tennis product. Before we go into the matches, we'll tell you a little bit about yourself, Rory. I mean, I met you, I think it was 20 years ago now. We worked both. I think it was, my daughter's 21. And I think she was about 1 or 2. So that's how it must have been 19, 20 years ago. And we met working on Setanta Sports News, which was a sort of a 24-hour news channel, which was a competitor at the time to Sky Sports. What great days they were.
Yeah, I remember that in Gray's Inn Road in London, in the ITN building, Setanta Sports News. Yeah, it was a long time ago. I was kind of working as a assistant producer,
waitress
there.
In a cocktail bar.
And you were doing some of your betting stuff now and again, and it was that was so. I think Setanta Sports News started in 2007, if memory serves. It might have been a little bit earlier, and then it lasted about 18 months, and then they went bust. And then I was freelancing in mostly TV production. And then I worked for a bookies as their PR and did a lot of horse racing stuff for them, and appeared on TV and radio, odd bits of other sport, but mostly horse racing. And it was about then, in about 2011, when I started this bookies job. And obviously you get to talk to the traders and the people who make the books. And you do other sports as well. And that's when I really started. I mean, I'd always liked tennis. I'd always enjoyed watching tennis. But that was when I started thinking tennis was a very good betting medium, and particularly women's tennis. Now, obviously you do the ATP with Sean, but I'm not as big a fan of men's tennis because men's tennis is very serve dominated. You know, if you've got a big serve, you get cheap points on serve. The women don't have that so much. And when I started betting on women's tennis, it was very, very you had a lot of one-sided matches, and that's how I would play it. I would look for the really one-sided matches, particularly early in the slams. You had the likes of Serena and Maria Sharapova, Azarenka, Ivanovic, and then even on clay. And clay always seemed to exacerbate the difference. Because you can't hit quick winners on clay, you play out long rallies because it's so slow. So players like Sam Stosur and Sara Irani on clay, and you could always find their matches against inferior opposition and bet on. I used to bet on the set scores, 6-love and 6-1. Look for those one-sided matches and bet those, and I had quite a lot of success with that. So as the years went by, I mean, and one thing which I enjoy more now, it doesn't make it so attractive to bet on, is that the depth in women's tennis has grown immeasurably since I started betting, and those bets just don't work anymore. It's very hard to find those one-sided matches. So now I think because it's so open. I mean, we're going to discuss the 2 tournaments this week. Well, there are 3 tournaments. There's also the United Cup, but that's a team event. We'll avoid that. There are a number of players who can win these tournaments now, and you can get upsets. And I much prefer betting on the outright now, and occasionally the odd match, but you can find some good value at the start of tournaments. And sort of my general kind of philosophy is a bit overblown, but my tactics are. You'll have discussed the same thing with Sean. The first thing to look for in these tournaments is court speed. It's so important. How fast the courts are going to play makes such a big difference on the profile of the player you're looking at to win the tournament. Both of these tournaments this week are on hard courts. One is on a quicker court than the other. We'll get into that into more detail. But even on clay, for instance, you have differences. Not all clay courts are the same. You have a tournament like Madrid, which is at altitude, so the ball travels quicker, and you tend to get non-clay court specialists doing quite well there. And sometimes it's not the easiest to find out the speed of the court. So another good guide is seeing players who have done well at the tournaments in the past. And on court speed, we're not going to be looking at Iga Swiatek this week, the world number 1, because she's in the United Cup. But she's pretty much unbeatable on clay and on slower hard courts. On faster hard courts, she's definitely vulnerable. So she's extremely short for the Australian Open, which is coming up in just a few weeks. I think she's plus 150 for that tournament. And I'd avoid her at all costs on because it's a quicker surface at the Australian Open. We've seen that she struggles on grass, and even the US Open that she won, which is on a medium speed surface, she was in all sorts of trouble in a couple of matches against Jill Niemeyer and Arina Sabalenka. So she can get it done, but the quicker the court, the more she struggles. So that's court speed. And the next things I'm looking at the draw is all important, obviously, and I'm looking at form. It's form players go well. There are some players who are in a horrible run of form. We'll get onto a couple of them later. And, you can't really back them until you've seen that they've shown some form. So there you go. What was the question again?
And that's just been Game Better Match, the first edition of WTA. Thanks for watching. The thing is, the one thing they take from it is that you're talking about form and coming into the Australian Open and these tournaments. Favourites are vulnerable, aren't they? If you're going to get a favourite beat or you're going to get an outsider win an event, the first couple of tournaments of the year, certainly that's the case on the ATP Tour and the WTA event, and obviously in the Australian Open, which is just a few weeks away. So, we need to look at form players. I mentioned it to Sean yesterday. The bookies really react to somebody who wins a tournament here. Like if an unknown player won the Auckland event or the Adelaide event, they would be slashed in half for the Australian Open, purely and simply because of that form guide coming into the new year. And there's sometimes a little bit of an overreaction to it. I slightly disagree with you on Swiatek in terms of, yes, she can get beat at Wimbledon. But I think that she's got a dominance around her now. There's an aura around her now. She knows she's the number 1. Like it took Ash Barty a bit of time before her shock retirement to realize that she was the world number 1. And she had that sort of aura when she went on court. I saw Swiatek playing in the World League in Dubai when I was coming back from the World Cup, and she was unbelievable against Garcia. I know it was an exhibition game, but I feel that aura of her now knows that I can beat these players. I am so far clear of I think her number 1 and her in the number 2 is as big as, say, the number 2 and the number 16 in the world at the moment, and probably even bigger on clay courts. So I do take your point that she's a very low favourite, a plus 150, but I do think there is this kind of confidence around her now that makes her really a frightening prospect in 2023, and I think she can dominate. Other than Wimbledon, I think it's going to be very hard to stop her. Australian Open, yes, but I think what she did last week, she was sensational.
Yeah, she is. I mean, I wouldn't disagree that she is clearly the number 1 by far. I mean, she's consistent, but as I say, and most of these tournaments these days are played on kind of medium, slowish hard courts, which suits her. But as I say, when it gets to the quicker courts, she can struggle. And the US Open, and because of that aura around her and that confidence she has, she managed to drag herself out of bad situations, especially against Sabalenka. I mean, she looked in all sorts of trouble there and managed to get herself out of it. But she is very,
it's all
very
about
exciting.
the price as well, though. It's all about everything's about the odds. I mean, plus 150 for the Australian Open. I'm saying that she's dominant. I'm saying that she's definitely the girl to beat, which we all know. But would I bet her at plus 150? No. Certainly not. I'd look for some each way value in the opposite half towards her, and I'd be opposable, but probably opposable though in match bets. Okay, that's enough about the future. It's all about now. It's all about the first two tournaments that we're covering on the WTA tour. The first one with Adelaide is Adelaide 1. It's like a Rocky 1, Adelaide 2, Adelaide 3.
This time it's personal.
Yeah, Adelaide 4. Some Russian's going to come in and win it and beat. So yeah, Adelaide 1. Obviously, this tournament is there's two tournaments, Adelaide 1 and Adelaide 2. It was changed because of the COVID situation, but it's a really good draw. And then we're filming this now on Monday. There's been a night of first round matches overnight and Sunday for me Monday morning here. So Rory, you've had a look at the court, you've had a look at the results. You talk about court speed being very, very important. What did you make of the breakdown of the first day's play?
Yeah, it's pretty much as you'd expect. I mean, it's interesting. It's played on green set is the name of the court. It's the same that's used at the Australian Open. So it's pretty quick. Last year, Ashley Barty won Adelaide 1, and she beat Elena Rybakina, the subsequent Wimbledon champion, in the final. Madison Keys defeated Alison Risk to win Adelaide 2 last year, but that was a much, much weaker field. You had one really good match last night, it finished just a couple of hours ago, as we speak, where Rybakina defeated fifth seed Danielle Collins. She dropped the first set and then came back to win. And you also had Ludmila Samsonova, who dropped the first set against Shui Zhang and then absolutely roared back. I think she served about 17 or 18 aces. So it tells you, I mean, she has a big serve. That's her game, but it tells you it's quick if she can serve 17, 18 aces. So yeah, she was in trouble, but she got out of it. And now she's going to play the number 2 seed, Aryna Sabalenka. And that should be a very, very, very interesting encounter. As we've discussed, first tournament of the year for a lot of these players. Some did play in the World Tennis League, as you've mentioned. Hard to take too much from that because it is an exhibition. But the top seeds, Ons Jabeur, who had such a great year last year, made the final in Wimbledon. She has what looks like a routine starter against either Sorana Cîrstea or Victoria Golubic. Then she's likely to meet Rybakina in the quarterfinals. So, that could be quite tricky. And in the semis... Repeat of the Wimbledon final. Exactly. So, in the semis, it could be Anett Kontaveit, who's always one to watch on a quicker surface, in my opinion. That's the top half. Bottom half,
I think the top half, Rory, if you look at the top half, I think the top half looks a lot harder bracket than the bottom half. I think
I agree.
The bottom half looks, a lot easier to come through rather than the top half. There's one player, we'll come on to the you said about the World League, but I watched a couple of doubles games as well. And I tell you what, I thought Bianca Andreescu was showing some form. She's a former US Open champion, but I thought she was definitely a take for me that she could come back to some form. And she obviously lost the first set against Garbiñe Muguruza, and I thought, what on earth have I bet this girl for? Why did I? But then she come on the one. One player I would take out from what I saw. Again, very hard to read with exhibitions, but just someone not perhaps this week, but maybe in the opening rounds in the Australian Open, she's getting back to some sort of best form. Her.
Yeah, she's had so many injuries since that US Open success, and she's had dips in form, and she's shown sort of glimmers, and you think maybe she'll come back, and it just hasn't quite worked. So I think with her, I'd like to see some, consistent performances before jumping on that bandwagon again. She is very interesting. I mean, she's a slam winner. And she had that amazing, when she won that slam, she had that amazing few months, and then it's all kind of just gone a bit cold since then. But it would be great if she could get back into form. Yeah, she's interesting in that she's got a tough match coming up against Veronika Kudermetova. So that could be difficult. If she gets past that, well, the bottom half does look open. I mean, Sabalenka, Samsonova next.
Mm.
I do actually fancy Sabalenka for the tournament. I think this might be the time to catch her.
She's the woman that's probably cost me more money than any other woman in the last years. Whenever myself and Sean have looked at, and I've always thrown a play in on a future play on a WTA event, Sabalenka is always the one I call in because I think potentially she could win. She's got the game to win everything, but her unforced error count is so insanely high. And
yes.
I every time I mention Sabalenka, I can see Mr. Calvert sort of smirking to the left of his face, thinking, "Not her again, Nigel."
Well, she had that issue last season, though. Her serve just left her. I think it was sort of midway through last season. Her serve just stopped working. I mean, it was just painful. If she wasn't hitting an ace, it was almost certainly going to be a double fault. She just completely lost her serve. She's got that back. She's playing pretty well again. And, on her day, she should beat anyone. She can be a bit inconsistent. And, I think she's had enough chances to win a slam now. I can't see her as a betting proposition in a slam. In normal WTA tournaments, I think she's still one of the best players around. She's seeded number 2 here. She would be my pick in this tournament. A tentative pick, but she would be my pick here. I'm sure you're going to avoid her.
Listen, I said that I would. My New Year's resolution was never to bet Sabalenka again. I think I might have broken it in 2 days. Yeah. So, what price are we going to get for Sabalenka this week in Adelaide? Obviously, the Bet Rivers market is suspended at the moment because they're waiting for the first day's matches to complete. So to be open by the time this podcast comes live, we should have the prices available. What kind of price would we be looking at, Rory?
I think we were looking at. I did note it down last night. I think we were looking at around plus 550.
Right.
So it's not a bad price. Ons Jabeur is the favourite at sort of around the sort of plus 350 mark. So, if she does get past Samsonova, I don't think the bottom half looks all that difficult, as we've discussed. You've got the likes of, you've got Ostapenko and Pliskova in there, 2 other players who on their day can beat anyone. And if she gets through that, let's say she gets to the final against Jabeur, she's got a good head-to-head record against Jabeur. Sabalenka win only for me would be the bet, but it's not having a bet just for the sake of it. It's kind of just looking at it and thinking, actually, she could run through this tournament.
There's no pressure.
And then again, she could lose to Samsonova. So.
Yeah, but there's no pressure on it. There's no pressure on this tournament, no. and that's the beauty of someone who like her. When she comes in, no pressure, she can play with freedom. She can hit her winners, and she can win it. When she gets into a Grand Slam quarterfinal, and the pressure is on that she's in she got to the semi-final at Wimbledon, didn't she, a few years back, and she folded. I think she played Barty in the semi-final, but the pressure got to her, and that is the problem. And you see that with so many other players. So Sabalenka at around about plus 550 is Rory's pick in Adelaide 1. The outright prices should be available now on the Bet Rivers website, and if you just check out during the day, they will be there. But it's a win-only pick. Let's look at some matches, Rory, and I've done a little graphic here. So bear with me a second. I'm going to share the screen here. These are the selected matches on Adelaide first round. Now these should be played we're losing the day, so it should be played Monday afternoon, early evening over in America. And these are the prices here. Have they come up yet? Have we got them? There we go. Oh, they're your picks. Oh, no, I put the wrong graphic. What am I doing? Hang on. I got carried away. I don't want everyone to see those. I wanted to get the other ones. Okay, so here we have the Adelaide selected matches. It should be... Oh, it's showing the wrong one. Anyway, you run through it, Rory, and we'll take them through.
I think the first one's Qinwen Zheng against Annette Kontaveit, I believe. Yep. Yes. And Zheng is minus 141. Kontaveit is plus 114. Quite surprised to see Kontaveit the outsider here. I will declare this is probably going to be a regular theme. Here we are.
I've done it.
This is probably going to Lovely
It's like
stuff.
showing. This is like when you get your VCR video, your dad's trying to work out, but you're showing our age there. Me and these graphics we don't go well together. So they're the 5 matches we picked, Rory. So just talk us through these matches.
Yeah. So the top match, as I say, quite surprised to see Contivate the outsider. This might be a bit of a recurring theme. I warn you. I do have a bit of a soft spot for Annette Contivate. She went on an absolute tear at the end of 2021, indoor hard courts, won everything pretty much, rose to number 2 in the world as a result. Partly because she linked up with Dmitry Tursunov, the old Russian player, who transformed her mentally. She'd been really brittle under pressure in the past, but then, it seemed like her instructions were, you get into a tight situation, you just keep going for your shots. And it made such a difference. She had that great run of form. They've split. I mean, Tursunov had a bit of difficulty getting to tournaments after the whole Ukraine war situation. Although he did have a short spell with Emma Raducanu at the end of last season. More on her later. But Contivate, difficult 2022. She had a fairly long spell out with COVID. She's down to number 17 in the world. She should have beaten Serena at the US Open, but she got drawn into a slugfest, which was pretty much the only way Serena could win that match. And she did. End of the season, she reached the final on home soil in Tallinn, indoors hard court, before running into Barbara Krejcikova, rejuvenated Krejcikova in the final. And then she retired hurt in her opener in Ostrava. Her opponent, Qin Wensheng, it's a funny one because let's use a horse racing term, she's been a bit of a talking horse for a little while, Qin Wensheng. I'm not entirely sure why. She did beat Paula Badoza in straight sets in Tokyo last September. She's, won the odd, she's beaten the odd good player, but, I think she's she's even behind Contivate on the world rankings. So I can't really see why she's favourite. Contivate, as I said, she's really good indoors on hard court. Sorry, go on, Nigel.
Do you think there is some kind of anti-Contivate from the betters? Because she was labelled the worst player ever to be the number 2 seed in the WTA Games. When she played against Serena Williams, there was ultimately it really affected her. You saw her after the game, and everyone said that she choked and she allowed Serena Williams in. Do you think there's there's certain players that bettors and bookies know that the public won't want to bet? And I just got a feeling that Contivate is one of those players. Even when she was number 2 in the world, she was starting plus money in games against girls in the top 16. I don't think she probably has the credit that she deserved. And I think that people have sort of made her a bit of a scapegoat in the way that she was. And, and I think that's sort of ingrained in bettors' minds. Contivate, we're not going to bet her. I mean, they're forgetting the run she went on.
Yeah, I'd agree totally. So, last season, I really fancied her for the Australian Open, and she ran into Clara Towson, who is another player I really like, who I also backed for the Australian Open.
I backed her for the Australian Towson.
Yeah, and Towson beat her. So that was that. And then she's not particularly good on clay, so the French Open was never an option. Wimbledon for Contivate, she was still getting over COVID. So, yeah, okay. And I'm a little bit biased, but I'd say she had her excuses. She had her reasons. Yeah, the US Open against Serena, it was emotional. It was Contivate. She doesn't have many dimensions to her game. She likes to hit the ball hard these days. She doesn't have that much variety, which is why she's really good on quick courts, on indoor hard courts. She can hit most players off the court. And she's trying to do that against Serena, which is, just not the thing to do. So she showed signs tail end of last season that she was coming back to her best. As mentioned, these courts in Adelaide are fast. I'd actually, before we sort of went through the matches we were going to discuss, I'd already noted down that I wanted to back her for this. So, I'm all over Contivate for this one.
So there she is, Contivate plus 114. And there's a few other favourites. Vondrousova minus 130, Victoria Azarenka minus 180. Pliskova Ostapenko looks an interesting betting event, minus 125. Pliskova plus 102, Ostapenko. We gather that we know that Contivate is your pick at plus 114. But is anything else in those other 4 games that have caught your eye, or any leans you have in any direction?
Yeah, Alexandra Vondrousova. I'm surprised. I thought it would be the other way round, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Vondrousova has been the more active of the two. She beat Danielle Collins in the Billie Jean King Cup in Glasgow. She then played a couple of challenger events in December. Didn't really get very far. Sorry, she just played one of them in Angers. She lost in the quarterfinals to Alicia Parks. Alexandrova had a really good season last year on quicker courts as well. She won the Wimbledon warm up in Hertogenbosch in just before Wimbledon. She won the tournament in Seoul, and she took a set off Iga Swiatek in Ostrava indoor hard in the semi-finals. This is her first match in over 2 months, so Vondrousova might have a slight edge on match fitness, but I think Alexandra should be favourite there. The other one I really wanted to pick out, I mean, Ostapenko Pliskova, that really could go either way.
That's over games. There's got to be over 22 and a half.
Well, I just get the feeling from last year that Pliskova's on the decline. I mean, she didn't have a good year at all last year. Her last win against anyone of note was at the US Open against Victoria Azarenka. That said, the courts are fast, so that will suit her and her big serve. But as I said, I just don't think she's the player she was. Ostapenko, well, it depends which one turns up, doesn't it? I mean, she's capable of beating anyone on a day, and she's equally capable of losing against anyone. And I tend to avoid her as a betting proposition. At the prices should be at a pick, but you're a braver man than I am if you're going to back her. But the other match I wanted to look at was Kalinina against Azarenka, and I've been a fan of Azarenka for years. I mean, she was unfortunate to run into Serena Williams for so long. She'd have won at least 2 or 3 US Opens if Serena hadn't been around, and she'd have won a lot more slams. But there's a real match fitness edge here for Kalinina. She played both of the challenger events in France in December, both on indoor hard courts. She reached the semis in Angers, and then she won the event in Limoges. And in the qualification for this tournament, she beat Diana Yastremska and Anna Bondar, I think she's top 50 these days, the Hungarian. She's a clay court specialist, but she's no mug on hard courts. But she beat Bondar 6-1, 6-1. So she's in form. She's used to the surface. Azarenka hasn't played since October in Guadalajara. So at the prices, I think Kalinina's a pick here. I think plus 143. Just because, Azarenka hasn't played for nearly 3 months. I just think Kalinina, she is in form, and she could be the one here.
So there's a couple of outsiders there, but your main pick in Adelaide would be, no surprise, Kontaveit. I think we're going to hear that name quite regularly, I believe, in 2023.
I suspect so.
As the outsider, plus 114. We're going to quickly move on to the second tournament. Obviously, we're running out a little bit of time here, but we've got the tournament in Auckland, the ASB Classic. It's only a WTA 250 event, so it hasn't got the class field that we saw in Adelaide. What do you think of the conditions here? You said it's a little bit slower than Adelaide, and who's caught your eye in the outright markets? Corey Goff is the favourite, by the way, here, and obviously this is a tournament that's been dominated by Americans. 4 of the last 6 winners here have been US-based players, and it's the first time it's played since 2020 because of COVID, where the winner in that year was Serena Williams.
Exactly. Yeah, the surface is plexicushion, which is a medium speed court, which shouldn't really help or hinder anyone in this field significantly. Goff should win this tournament. I mean, she's ranked number 7 in the world. Her record against top 10 players is pretty awful, but against players ranked below her, she's very consistent. But at the price, I think she's around plus 300. I'm happy to skip her. In the top half, there's her. The other player who caught my eye was Linda Frivertova. I think I got that pronunciation. Okay.
Yep.
But
I actually Googled that pronunciation, so I know you did it right. So I double checked it. Linda.
So she's interesting. She's up against Emma Raducanu in the first round. So I think we'll look at that match, hopefully, if we've got time. Those two are the players for me in the top half, but the price of Goff doesn't really appeal. Bottom half is wide open. Sloane Stephens just isn't a betting proposition as far as I'm concerned. She, a bit like Ostapenko, can be brilliant one day and terrible the next. If she puts it all together, she makes the final easily. If Karolina Muchova was fit, I'd be backing her, but she hasn't. She's struggled with injuries for so long. I was tempted at a huge price by Yaseline Bonaventure, the Belgian, who did beat Katie McNally in the early hours. She had a pretty good year last year, but also overnight, Leylah Fernandez, who was beaten by Emma Raducanu in that US Open final a couple of years ago, she thrashed Brenda Kvitova. I'm going to try and get it right. I did it right earlier. Now I can't. Kvitova. There we go. Yep. Linda's younger sister, 15-year-old. She beat her 6-1, 6-1. Now, Fernandez struggled for much of last season with a foot injury, but I think this is a sign that she's back to full fitness. I think she's the main obstacle. I mean, the main obstacle for her would probably be Sloane Stephens if she gets that far. When I looked last night before they'd played earlier, she was around plus 1400. So when the markets go live again, hopefully we'll see about plus 1000, but should be a strong each way fancy for me.
And Leylah Fernandez obviously got to the US Open final where she played Emma Raducanu. And I know that you don't like the hopes of Emma Raducanu. You think she's going to struggle. She's up against through Vertova, as I think we're pronouncing it quite right. And there are the Auckland matches there. We've only got about 5 minutes, Rory. So quickly give us your pick there.
Yeah, I think Vertova, she won the Chennai Open last year, although I've been hunting for court speeds there and I can't find any mention of it. Raducanu's form, I mean, she's had all sorts of problems with injuries. She's gone through coaches and, she did in the World Tennis League, which you mentioned in Dubai, she did take a set off Ons Jabeur. So maybe she's not in bad form, but at the prices, you wouldn't really chance it. So I think for Vertova, given what she did last season, she's very much a talent on the rise. She's a player I'd be backing there. Other matches there, Muchova, Zhizhu Wang's interesting. She was playing absolutely lights out tennis for a set against Kontaveit in Tallinn before falling to defeat. And then she reached the semis in Cluj. So she'd be interesting, and she is the outsider there at plus 165. Zidanzek Davis. Zidanzek's primarily a clay courter, and Davis is pretty consistent on hard courts. I think that's priced about right. Sophia Kenin, down to 227 in the world, having been Australian Open champion just 3 years ago. She's had injuries, coaching changes, real slumps in form. She also made early exits in those challenger tournaments last month in France. Xinyu Wang is interesting. She won the ITF 60K tournament in Tokyo in October. She also beat Magna Linette in Cluj late last season. So again, just given the odds, I think Wang is the play here. And we talked enough about Sloane Stephens. I think she should comfortably beat Rebecca Masarova, but it's not one to play at that price.
There's a couple of outsiders there, and obviously, as we said at the start of the show, start of any tennis season, betting favourites is very difficult. Favourites don't necessarily win, and then it takes a bit of time, and until they come into the Australian Open, I think you can get favourites beat here. So there's a quick recap of Rory's picks. If you want to quickly run through them, Rory, these are your selections for the matches. If you want to just talk us through those quick bets that you got on Adelaide and Auckland.
Yep. So as mentioned, Arina Sabalenka outright. We'll see what the odds are in a few hours, but hopefully she's still around the plus 550 mark. And also Adelaide, Annette Kontaveit to beat Qinwen Zheng at plus 114. For Auckland, as I said, Leylah Fernandez, this would be an each way bet at plus 1,000. Hopefully she'll be about that after she won very comfortably last night. And then one match in the first round, Linda Fruhvirtova to beat Emma Raducanu at plus 160.
So there you go. That's the first edition of Game Bet Match WTA preview. With matches will be this afternoon in America and throughout the night. Obviously, they're in Australia. Check out Bet Rivers' website for the outright markets. You can follow myself and Rory and all the other fantastic handicappers we have on the Bet Rivers network on our joint Twitter handle @BecauseWeWin. There you can see all the shows. You can also subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much if you've already done so. And Game Better Match was in the top 5 regularly for podcasts on tennis last year's and in the Apple charts and all the other charts. So please make sure you download this on your preferred service provider for all your podcast needs. Rory, thank you very much. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us. I know we rushed that last little bit there, but I noticed some of the picks that you've given and some of the analysis you've done. I'm sure we're going to get into the swing of things a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. But thank you very much for joining us and build up to the Australian Open, which starts in a couple of weeks' time. And you'll be back next Monday with us.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. We'll have Adelaide 2, the revenge.
Jaws 3, Adelaide 2, Rocky 4.
No, it should be good. I mean, it's all roads lead to Melbourne and the Australian Open. And yeah, really looking forward to that first slam and seeing who comes out on top.
Take care, everyone. Happy New Year. And keep watching and keep subscribing. Take care. All the best.